is 3 o'clock on the dot Eastern time, so we might as well jump in because we have a lot to cover today. Again, I'm David Dodge. I'm the executive editor of Gays with Kids. And today we're doing our second in the surrogacy webinar series of 2021. This one is focused on building your surrogacy team. So this is a very important topic because these are the people that are going to guide you through your entire journey. And as I often say, people often say that it takes a village to raise a child, but with surrogacy, that's true just to conceive one. There's a lot of people, a lot of professionals involved in the journey and you want to make sure that you are picking not only people that you feel comfortable with and that you know are competent, but that have a long track record of helping queer men in particular complete this journey. So before I introduce our panel of experts here, I just want to give a little bit of a spiel as to who Gays with Kids is. If this is your first webinar with us. So we were founded over 6 years ago, basically just as a place to show inspiring stories of gay men and their path to parenthood, to try to increase visibility. And over the years, we built up quite a sizable following on Instagram and Facebook, which is probably where you know us from. And we've continually had people mention to us over the years that what you're doing is great, the visibility is great, but we actually want help to become dads. It's not easy if you're a queer man, if you're interested in surrogacy, adoption, foster care, co-parenting, all of the paths that are available to us. You don't just say whoops and one day end up being a father. These are complicated paths, are often very expensive paths. And so people need support in doing it. So we have spent the last couple of years preparing to relaunch Gays with Kids as a resource center as well, and have scoured the country to try to find, again, there are tons of options when you're looking for, especially within surrogacy and fertility of this world, lots of options out there for you, but they're not all created equal. They're not all serving the LGBTQ community in the same way. They don't all have the same track record of success. So we really wanted to find experts that we vetted and feel comfortable with introducing to our community at Gays with Kids. And so I'm very excited that we have the team of experts that you see here today that are very much a part of that community with us. So this again it's our second webinar in the series of surrogacy. We have a whole other webinar series about adoption. We're rolling one out around foster care. So if you're interested in those paths as well, please look for those on our site, gayswithkids.com. We have an events page. You can go register for those. But if surrogacy is your path and you're sure about that, we again have a whole series that are going to be being rolled out over the course of the next 3 to 4 months. So stay tuned for that, because we're going to go into depth on how to afford surrogacy. If you're abroad and interested in surrogacy, how that works, basically every little facet that you can think of. And we've also covered all these topics on our new resource center. We're calling it the Learning Center on gayswithkids.com. There you can go watching a curriculum series that basically walks you through step-by-step everything you need to know, from the minute you have the idea that you're interested in becoming a father, down to the agency that you're going to choose, the fertility clinic you're going to go with, all that good stuff. So, and we're rolling out new content basically every week. So please visit gayswithkids.com and check that out. And we'd love to get your feedback on it as well. I'll mention this several times throughout the webinar, but you can email us if we're not able to answer your question sufficiently, if we're not if we're not able to get to it, because we will have a lot to cover today. dads@gayswithkids.com. You can feel free to reach out to us there or on any of our social channels as well. So with that, let's introduce our panel of experts. So because we have just an hour, I'm going to let them do a better job introducing themselves when it gets to their turn to present. But we are very excited to be joined by Dr. Juan P. Alvarez of the Fertility Centers of Illinois, Virginia Hart of Arch Risk Solutions, Rich Vaughn of International Fertility Law Group, and Kristen Hanson of Simple Surrogacy. So these, again, what today's webinar is really about is going over all of the different professionals that are involved in helping you become a dad via surrogacy and IVF. Again, it is a team effort. All of these professionals collaborate together. They really are part of the team that makes it possible for you to go through this journey legally, safely, all that good stuff. So we're going to get into the thick of it right now, actually. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Alvarez, who's going to just first kind of level set and give us an understanding of what the surrogacy journey entails. Again, this is meant to go more deeply into the professionals that are involved, but just so we all are on the same page as to what surrogacy is, I'm going to turn it over for him right now.
Great. So again, hi, my name is Dr. Juan Alvarez. If you weren't able to hear me, I'm a board-certified reproductive endocrinologist and fertility specialist at Fertility Centers of Illinois in Chicago. And today I'm going to talk about really the 3 different phases of what a surrogacy journey looks like. what I mostly tell my patients is that there isn't really a right answer or a right way to do it, but there are several different steps that have to be done. So the first step is matching with an egg donor, as well as, matching with your surrogate, as well as matching with your egg donor to create an embryo. And so with this first part, you can start, most couples start either in the surrogacy agency or in the IVF clinic or the fertility clinic. Majority of my patients start off with the fertility clinic because we have the resources to refer out to different surrogacy agencies, to different egg donor agencies. There are also many fertility clinics who have their own egg donor programs, such as like Fertility Center of Illinois, we have our own egg donor program. And so there really is different ways of starting the journey. But overall, what we really do need is we need an egg from a donor, use the partner's sperm to create the embryo, and then have a matching with the surrogate. Once all that process happens, and I'm going to go over in a little bit more detail in a later slide as to how that happens medically, then the second step would be to do, which is considered to be the medical process. So this is when I, as a fertility doctor, I stimulate the egg donor, create the embryos, and then we store them, as well as doing the medical process for the surrogate. So as a fertility doctor, I also stimulate the surrogate, make sure that her lining is prepared to have an embryo transfer, and then do the actual embryo transfer. Then the last part of the whole journey is, of course, the pregnancy. And as a fertility doctor, we follow the pregnancy up to 8 weeks of gestation. So we want to make sure that the embryo transfer went correctly. And then afterwards, we follow the pregnancy very closely. We follow it with ultrasounds to make sure that the pregnancy is evolving normally before the surrogate moves on to see the OBGYN, who will take over the care, basically, their prenatal care, all the prenatal visits, as well as the delivery. But everything starts with getting the embryo and getting that surrogate.
Great, thank you so much. And I should have mentioned this before handing it off, that you'll notice that this is in the webinar format, so you're not going to be on screen or able to speak. But if you do have a question at any point during the presentation, please use the Q&A function, which you can access at the top or bottom of your screen, or you can chat us if you'd like to message us privately. We, as soon as the question comes into mind, feel free to pop it in, and I'll be curating those and getting them ready for the 30 minutes that we're reserving at the end of the presentation for Q&A. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to Kristen, who's going to briefly go over each of the professionals that are involved in your journey.
Great. Thank you so much, David. So my name is Kristen Hanson, and I am with Simple Surrogacy. We are a full-service surrogacy agency located in Dallas, Texas. And so an agency is just one of the many professionals that you're going to need to help you through your surrogacy journey. There are a lot of different parts and moving sections of a surrogacy journey, and you're really going to want to make sure you have experts in every level of those. So as Dr. Alvarez was just speaking about the clinic is definitely one of the main people that you're going to have to choose from among the many great clinics in the country to represent you in your surrogacy journey with the medical part of the process. So that is the first bubble here that you see on the stage, reproductive endocrinologist, which is just a fancy word for the doctor that makes the embryos. They'll be the ones that are actually creating the embryos with the donor eggs and mixing them with your sperm and possibly your partner's sperm, and then implanting those into the surrogate. And so that part of the process is really the key part that makes you a surrogate parent, makes you an intended parent. And the reproductive endocrinologist job is very important throughout the process because they're going to be the ones screening your donor, making sure they're medically appropriate, screening your surrogate, and actually creating the embryos and transferring. And the surrogate will be under their care until they're released to their OBGYN. Another person that you're going to need involved is a reproductive attorney. You'll hear from Richard Vaughn later on. He is one of the preeminent attorneys in the country, as I'm sure he's going to fill you in himself. But an attorney is really important because you're going to want to make sure that after your baby is born that you have the legal rights to your child. A really good attorney is very important because I have seen, luckily not through our personal experience, but across the country, I've seen cases where the attorney files in the wrong county or doesn't have the correct paperwork. And that creates a lot of heartache for intended parents if, they've gone through all of this trouble and at the end, they are not the legal parents of their children. I actually just saw a case pop up on Google that parents had tried to do surrogacy in Michigan this week. Didn't consult an attorney beforehand. Surrogacy is totally illegal in Michigan, and they now have to adopt their surrogate children. So it's really important that you have a reproductive attorney that knows what they're doing, that isn't going to steer you wrong. Another important person in your journey is a mental health expert. So in most cases, the agency that you're working with is going to refer you out to a psychologist or a psychiatrist who's going to screen both you and your partner, and then the donor and the surrogate. And occasionally, depending on your clinic, may require everyone to have a session together to be screened in that way. It's really important that the medical health professionals clear everyone and make sure everyone has everything necessary in their mental toolkit to be able to undergo a surrogacy without having a lot of bumps and hiccups and items in the road. And also, a mental health professional can be vital throughout the journey in case there is someone who needs counseling or someone who needs to process what they have going on in their relationship with their intended parents or with their surrogate, or even just in their families if sometimes people don't understand. So really, a good mental health expert that can be available throughout the journey can be an invaluable resource. You're also going to have an insurance expert. You're going to hear later from Virginia Hart, who again is one of the best insurance experts in the country. She can really explain to you all the ins and outs of insurance as they appear today. And I say today because tomorrow it could be different. We've actually heard of some rumblings of things that are possibly happening under the new administration that are changing this week in insurance. So that's how important it is that you have someone that you can speak to as an insurance expert that's going to know everything that's going on, up to the minute knowledge of what's happening. I got an email from Virginia's agency this week informing us of changes that were happening this week. So having a really good relationship with an insurance expert who's going to bring you up to date on changes is important, because you don't want to be caught without insurance for your surrogate. That can get very expensive. And you want to make sure that your baby is going to have the appropriate insurance when they're born, especially if you're an international intended parent. And finally, you're going to need a caseworker. So that is, again, a function of the agency. The agency is kind of the clearinghouse for coordinating a lot of this overall process. They can help you find a clinic if you don't already have one, or they'll coordinate you with the clinic if you've already chosen one. They can help connect you with a reproductive attorney if you haven't already located one. They'll refer you to mental health experts, and they'll also assign a caseworker. So a caseworker at an agency is someone who has been through many surrogacy processes over the years and has kind of seen everything and is there to basically be your guide throughout the entire process. There's been a lot of ups and downs in a surrogacy journey. There always are. And the caseworker is the person you can call even in the middle of the night if you need to, with just urgent questions or just to talk about your feelings or to process any part of the process that you might not necessarily want to speak with directly with your surrogate about. So the caseworker is kind of your coordinator through the entire process and will be your guide.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So now we're going to go into depth in each of these. We're going to spend the next 20 minutes going into depth on each of these different professionals that are involved. And we're going to stick with Kristen, who's going to first walk us through what a surrogacy agency does and how you can go about making sure that you find one that works best for you.
Great. So as Dr. Alvarez mentioned in the beginning, there's a lot of different ways to start your surrogacy journey. Some people do start with a clinic and go in and get medically cleared and possibly even create embryos before they start working with a surrogacy agency. Other times people will start with a surrogacy agency because they're kind of the clearinghouse to manage the entire process throughout all the different expertise that comes into the system. So an agency is going to do a lot of things for you. Most of all is primarily managing the process. Now, you probably have heard that you can also do an independent surrogacy, which is what you would do if you did not have an agency involved. That is one path to go. However, I would say, especially as an agency, I would caution you doing that just because it's going to be a full-time job for you. There is a lot that goes into the process of managing a surrogacy, and you're going to have to know a lot of different things in a lot of different areas to make the process run smoothly. So when you come into an agency, the first thing that they're going to do is evaluate you mentally and to kind of ask questions about your background, where you are in the process, if you've already selected a clinic, if you've already selected an attorney, insurance experts, or those kinds of things. And so we'll be able to kind of fill in what you've already selected and work with you to select what you haven't yet selected. They're also going to match you with a surrogate and possibly a donor, depending on what type of agency you choose. They'll refer you to expert attorneys that are going to work in the state where your surrogate and or donor and or clinic are located, because there's a lot of different factors that go into selecting an attorney that's going to work for your particular situation. They're going to refer you to licensed mental health professionals that are going to be able to give you a background check and a psychological examination, the same for your donor and the same for the surrogate, again, to make sure everyone's got the mental toolkit that they need to get through the surrogacy process, and there's not going to be anything unforeseen that might raise up trouble later on. And also very important in the process is an agency is going to manage the escrow. You may have an independent escrow company, you may be held by the agency that you're working with, but overall the agency is going to read the contract and make sure that the money that's going out from your escrow adheres to all of the parts of the contract that you've worked out with your attorney. So they're going to go back and double check things and make sure that the surrogate is submitting for the right things, in the right amounts, in the right order of time, and make sure that you don't have to be double checking that process throughout. So that's basically what the agency does.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kristen. Okay, so next we're going to be walked through what a fertility center does and how to pick one by Dr. Alvarez.
Great. So how to pick a fertility clinic or a fertility center. My best advice would be that first, look somewhere local. It's usually easier to find a local facility, especially in big cities, who do treat a lot of patients. The number one thing that I do stress is once you go see a fertility clinic, to see how many cycles of egg donors does the clinic do? How many cycles of gestational carriers do they do? What are the pregnancy rates for women who are less than 35? So these are sort of overall ideas that one should have when trying to find a fertility clinic. I would say the best way to go about it would be to go to the websites of the different clinics. Usually in the website, they have information on their different programs. So like at Fertility Center of Illinois, we have a big third-party reproduction. And I just want to touch bases a little bit on the, the dialect, because everybody may not know what everything means. So a third party means that we're using a third person in the process of the fertility journey. So a third party means that we're using donor eggs, donor sperm, gestational carrier. So this department really embodies the whole process of dealing with the fertility journey for gay couples. Once you pick the fertility clinic, in the first appointment, meeting with the doctor like myself, talking about what the whole evaluation is going to look like. And for the gay couple, for the partners, it's the fertility journey starts with the semen analysis or sperm analysis. We have to make sure that the sperm is healthy enough and the quantity is good enough to be able to fertilize the eggs. So there has to be sort of a initial sort of workup for the couple. We also discuss different testing, such as genetic screening, and all of the egg donors get genetic screening for recessive genetic disorders. And so if a donor, and these are topics that would be explained during the evaluation process or in the consultation, but basically all donors get screened for recessive genetic disorders. And if they're a carrier, doesn't mean that they're ineligible to become a donor, but it would mean that we would have to do extra testing for the parents to make sure that they are not carriers of the same disease. So the fertility center, I would say, is really the hub of the entire journey, and it's keeping track of every single thing that's happening at all times. So you have the egg donor, you have the surrogates, you have the embryo transfer, you have the legal, you have the psych. So everything, and most clinics work in a way of a checklist. Have you done your semen analysis? Have you done your legal documents? Have you done so? Really, I would say the fertility center or the fertility clinic is the hub of everything. we would both create the embryo and do the transfer at the fertility center. There's also other things that we discuss, such as pre-implantation genetic testing, which is not for everybody, but it is definitely discussed, the pros and the cons, as well as the process of doing pre-implantation genetic testing. So in the fertility center, like I said, we do the health screening for the egg donor. So an egg donor really has to be a young woman who's healthy, who has a good ovarian reserve, no medical conditions. So the fertility center is screening both your egg donor and is also screening your gestational carrier once once a match has been done with the surrogacy agency. So we're sort of kind of like the red line, we're the hard stop. We would say, yes, you guys can continue with this person, or we suggest or recommend to use a different donor or a different surrogate. So we really are the place where we would discuss what is the success, how successful is this going to be, we can talk about pregnancy rates, we can talk about doing single embryo transfer, double embryo transfer. So really the fertility clinic and the fertility doctor is a huge tool in the whole journey. And I would say that only as a fertility doctor and with my gay patients, and I wish I would see them a lot more often, but we really only talk once in our initial consultation, and then maybe a second time in our second consultation to discuss, everything in the process. So really getting to know the fertility center, how they function, how they work, do they work with LGBT patients, their overall success rates as well as clinical load is very important. And not only that, but not only do we create the embryos, but we also store them in our facility for safekeeping. Majority of couples, they like to have 2 kids, and with one cycle, with most donors, we can get multiple embryos that we would only transfer 1 and then possibly transfer another one for a second pregnancy. So my overall advice would be to do a little bit of homework on your fertility clinic. I would start locally, especially if you're in a big city like Chicago or Miami or New York or Los Angeles, but also other places. They have great fertility clinics. For international patients, usually the coasts are easier if you're traveling, East Coast or West Coast. So these are all the things that you should keep in mind, that the fertility center is really the hub. You're going to be talking to the fertility doctor, and they're going to be guiding you through the entire process. And then we're going to be making sure that there's going to be a high success in your treatment.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, now we are going to move on to how to pick an insurance agency to help you with your process.
Great, thank you. And I actually could use the technology to unmute myself. So it's starting off great. And my name is Virginia Hart. I am the CEO of Art Risk Financial and Insurance Solutions. We've been in business since officially 2011, but I've been doing surrogacy insurance since about 2001, so a long time. We actually are a full service insurance brokerage, so we can take care of your entire journey from the donor insurance to recipient insurance through some discounting programs we have. We have a financing program available, as well as insurance for your surrogate and your egg donor, and then also yourselves if you need insurance for your newborn. And even if you are in the US, you actually do need to check out your newborn insurance options, because some insurances don't cross state lines. Sometimes you only have an HMO that may not work where the surrogate's delivering. So it's something that you kind of need to think about as well. And I would recommend early versus later in the journey. So there are several different types of coverages that you're going to need. If your surrogate has insurance, then yay. But you do need to make sure that it will cover a surrogate pregnancy. So we recommend having it evaluated by a surrogate insurance professional, which it could be an attorney, it could be our agency. There are other agencies that do it as well. But that way you'll know, and you'll get a written report of whether or not her insurance will cover it. If it covers it, you're good. You might want to look at a secondary or a backup plan just in case something does go wrong. But for the most part, you're in good shape. If she does not have a surrogate friendly insurance, then we say, well, what's available? And it used to be that depending upon the time of the year, it would make a difference, because we always would go, the next best thing would be an Affordable Care Act plan or an ACA plan, which is only available during open enrollment, which is ending on the 31st in the last 2 remaining states where you can still get it. Otherwise, it's November 1 to December 15th. And then it's gone. Kristen was alluding to is President Biden has said that he is going to extend the ACA enrollment period for another several months because of people who of COVID, basically, who did not enroll and perhaps need insurance coverage and realize that COVID is not going away tomorrow. So we're waiting for news on that. It's supposed to either be late today or early tomorrow sometime. So film at 11. And when she says it changes daily, trust me, it changes almost daily. If we cannot get an ACA plan, then we're going to ask you, when are you going to transfer? And can we piecemeal something together that would protect you financially so that you won't have any large exposure, but also get you to that Affordable Care Act open enrollment period so that she delivers on an Affordable Care Act plan? So there's a couple of ways that we do that are affordable. And again, our goal is to get you the best coverage for the least amount of money so that you are financially protected through this process, but you're not, giving away your firstborn child that you're trying hard to get in order to obtain the insurance. So that is also an option. Or we have plans that are available through Lloyd's of London, either through New Life Agency or Universal Family Insurance. That is the most expensive way to go, and you're going to be looking at approximately $30,000. If you have twins, it's even more than that. So that's like we call it our last resort, because it kind of is. If there's any other way we can do it, we're going to encourage you not to spend the money that way, but to spend it, get yourself protected, but spend less money. You're also going to need to have life insurance for your surrogate. The contract's going to require that. So you want to make sure that it's covered. You can do that through traditional term life insurance, or you can do it through an accidental death policy, again, through either New Life or Universal Family Insurance. To those programs, you can also offer loss of reproductive organ, which means because your contract's going to state that if she were to lose a fallopian tube or a uterus or something like that, you have to give her a cash payout. Well, the loss of reproductive organ insurance will take care of that cash payout. You also want to take a look at if she's a working mom, is there any type of disability insurance that's available that would help cover your contractual need to repay her lost wages? And that's actually really kind of hard to get on the open market. There are some plans that are coming out from Lloyd's of London that look like they're going to be extremely promising. One I'm actually developing right now, so we hope to have it out within the next month or two. But it's underwriting in London, so we cross our fingers on that one. And so that's a possibility. Or does she have it through her employer? Or is she in California and have it through her employer or through the state? Because in California we have the state, Connecticut now has it in the state. So that's another way that you can look at that. Her employer sponsored would be the best. So at open enrollment, the agencies I know always ask their surrogates, what are they offering this year that you might want that might be advantageous for your journey? So that's what you need. As far as you also need to look at for your donor, you want to get donor insurance. That a lot of times it's offered through your clinic, but if it's not, or through your agency, but if it's not, you want to get it, and that's going to cover the donor from the start date of medication through the transfer process and any complication that would arise because of the transfer process. You also want to look into getting it for your surrogate, because that will cover the surrogate from the start date of medication through the transfer and any complication that would happen due to the transfer. It will not cover a miscarriage because that's not a complication of the transfer, but it will probably cover, actually it will cover an ectopic pregnancy because you don't know what happened, right? How did the egg get where it wasn't supposed to be? Who knows? So that is considered a complication. So that's good to know. And the reason why you want to get recipient insurance, even if she has healthcare coverage, is because most healthcare coverage actually excludes infertility benefits or anything that has to do with infertility. And so therefore, if the complication is due to infertility, the insurance company would not have to cover it. I do want to let you know that there are some states where pregnancy is a qualifying event, so the open enrollment period is waived. And that would be currently Vermont, New York, Connecticut, and yes, Maryland. Connecticut's kind of a funky state. You actually have to apply at transfer, which makes no sense, but it's how they wrote their law. So you can apply. Those are the basic insurances that you're going to need for your journey. And for the most part, there's a question that says what's included, but there's no discrimination. One of the questions that's here is like, LGBTQ inclusivity. Absolutely. There's absolutely no discrimination in that respect whatsoever. So your agency, if you're working with a good agency, is going to vet your current surrogate's insurance. They're going to make sure that whatever plans they put in place for you are appropriate for surrogacy and do not have any surrogacy exclusions. They're going to make sure that you have every step of the journey covered and that they know how to cover the insurance, etc. So that's what you want to make sure they do. You also want to make sure they've been in business for a while, because insurance for surrogates is complicated, and you want them to understand the complexities, and you want them to be able to read an insurance policy and understand the complexities of that policy and the nuances of language. So if they just started tomorrow, they may not know that one company is great in Ohio and horrible in every other state. They may not know that. I know that. So those are as does my staff. So those are the types of things that you want to look at. You also want to make sure that they're working with reputable insurance companies. We just had a disaster recently in the surrogate world, and it really is a disaster, where the company had been in place for 2 years, went out of business, and isn't paying claims. So they paid premium, and now they don't have any coverage. So you want to make sure that they have a long-standing history of good, reputable companies that they're working with, and that therefore you won't get stuck with bills. And I believe I probably overstayed my welcome, and it's probably someone else's turn to talk, because David's kind of giving me that look. I can kind of tell.
No, not at all. Thank you very much. We do have one more slide, but then I definitely want to make sure that we have plenty of time for Q&A, because I'm sure lots of questions are coming up for people. And again, as you're having these questions come to mind, please just drop them straight into the Q&A function, or you can chat us privately, and I'm starting to amass them, and we'll get through as many of those as we can at the end of the presentation. Okay, so for our last slide, before we get to Q&A, we're going to go over what a reproductive attorney does and how to pick one with Rich Vaughn. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, David. My name is Rich Vaughn, and first of all, I am a gay father with 2 kids through egg donation and surrogacy. So I've been through this process personally. I know what it's like. I know how confusing and overwhelming it can be at the beginning, and you've got a great team here to talk to you through how to get through it smoothly. In terms of picking an attorney, it's really important that you have somebody who's very experienced in this space. I'm fortunate to have joined a firm that's been in place since 1992. We've done over 30,000 cases. About 65% of those are with LGBT clients, so we have a lot of expertise in that specific area as well. Our firm is national as well. We work all across the country, and we have offices in LA, Dallas, New York, and Beijing, and we speak multiple languages. We can handle Spanish, Italian, German, Mandarin, and of course, I want to say Spanish, French, German, Italian, and Mandarin. So in terms of the legal work that you need to go through in this process, your lawyer will do 2 main things for you. First of all, your lawyer will be helping you with the agreements, the contracts that need to be put in place with your egg donor and with your surrogate. And then with regard to the surrogacy, the lawyer also will be eventually obtaining your parental rights through a court order to establish you as the legal parents and make it clear that your names will go on the birth certificate. Now, some agencies have in-house lawyers, and they can help guide you through some of the initial steps. And if you prefer, you can use them, or you can use an independent lawyer. And some agencies will actually outsource the lawyers as well. So you actually have choices in that regard. With regard to the contracts, let's talk about that for a minute. The egg donor and surrogacy contracts will typically get started after the endocrinologist, the IVF doctor, has approved the surrogate or the donor. So they go through medical screening. And by that time, the donors and surrogates will also have gone through psychological screening, as Kristen had mentioned. The surrogate will go through criminal background checks. And with regard to the surrogate as well, you'll want her health insurance to be reviewed, or you'll get her a new policy, as Virginia had alluded to. And you'll also need to have set up or know where you're going to set up an escrow account. Once those things are done, then the lawyer comes in and drafts the contract. For the experienced lawyers, they have templates for these documents, and they will customize the templates to the specifics of your case, and the specifics will be provided to them by the agency that has helped match you. So all the deal terms, all of the special things that you've discussed with the agency about the match, that is provided to the attorney so it can be incorporated into the contract. You typically will see it first. After you read it, have asked your questions, and you understand it, then the donor or surrogate will get a chance to look at that contract. They typically will have a separate attorney. It's pretty much required in every state. So their attorney will go over the contract with them, get back to you and let you know if there are any changes that need to be negotiated. And eventually that contract is ready to be finalized and signed. Once the contract is signed, then as lawyers, we give legal clearance to the doctor. The doctors will not proceed with the cycle and instruct the egg donor or the surrogate to begin their injectable medications for the cycle until the contract has been completed. So getting legal clearance is literally the last thing you need to do before you can really start the cycle and move forward. And as lawyers, we know that we're the last ones in the way, so we tend to try to get them done quickly. On average, your donor contract should take about 2 to 3 weeks to complete, and on average, the surrogacy contract will take about 3 to 4 weeks to complete. Now, the second main chunk of work for the lawyer to do is to, in the surrogacy case, help establish your parental rights. The laws in this area vary from state to state, so it's important in the contract that the contract is compliant with local law. And then when you're getting ready to establish your parental rights, you typically go to court in the state where the birth will occur, and you follow the law of that state. You follow the procedures. You will have to prepare the documents that are required in that state, and you will have to follow the timeline that's allowed by that state. And by that I mean, in many states, you're allowed to go to court during the pregnancy and obtain a pre-birth order from the court, which will clarify that the surrogate is not the parent, that you are the parent or parents, and that your names will go on the birth certificate. Now, in most of these pre-birth arrangements, pre-birth order states, I should say, we typically will get the court order by about the 28th week of pregnancy, and then we provide a copy of that court order to the hospital, so the hospital is aware of the upcoming surrogacy birth, and we can work out all of their questions, get them any other documents they might need, and basically have everything ready to go so that when the birth does occur, there are no more questions and everything should run very smoothly. There are, however, other states that do not allow us into court during the pregnancy, and they won't allow us in until the birth has occurred. So in those states, our job as the lawyers is to, again, preview everything with the hospital. We still will talk to the hospital at about 28 weeks of pregnancy and queue everything up for them, but the thing that's remaining is the court process. So after the birth in those post-birth states, will go to court quickly and get the court order. The court order is basically the same as it would be in a pre-birth order state, only it's now after birth, and we typically will actually name the child and list the date of birth in the court order. So that's the process from start to finish. There are other things that can be done depending on your needs, including discussing estate planning, guardianship documentation, that kind of thing, but that's more of an individualized case-by-case thing. But the main work is contracts and parental establishment.
Great, thank you so much. So now we have just over 20 minutes to get into Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see everyone. And so if your head is spinning after all of that information, so is mine. I have been working in this world now for 6 years now, and it's still just overwhelming just how many moving parts there are. But the good news is that the people you see on the screen here are here to answer all these questions and handle all the complications for you. So now we're just going to get through as many of these questions as we can. Again, if we don't get to your question or if we're not able to answer sufficiently, please do email us at dads@gatewaykids.com, and we'll make sure one of our experts gets back to you as soon as possible. So the first question is, I'm going to expand on this a little bit. So the question is specifically wondering if for a fertility clinic, do you need to use the same one for your egg donor and surrogate? So can you create the embryos in one and have them transferred at another? But so I think I'm just also interested in having you all kind of talk about geography and how much that matters in this world, because you can be all over the country. I mean, your fertility clinic can be in one place and your agency in another. But so why don't we start with that specific question, Dr. Alvarez, and then we'll bring in some others to get that perspective.
Yes. So this is a very common question, and no, location does not matter. We have many couples who come to our clinic, and their donor is in another city or another state, as well as the surrogate. But we are the one, we handle everything. And we also collaborate with other fertility clinics. So let's say we have a patient of mine who is in Chicago and her donor is in New York. She would start her stimulation cycle and all of her preparation in New York with a combination of collaboration with the New York fertility clinic, and then she would travel to our offices here in Chicago to do the retrieval, to be able to freeze their embryos. Same goes with the surrogate. And many of our surrogates don't live in the city, and so they do also either their monitoring. They come to our offices. One of the great things about FCI is that we have 9 different locations all over Chicago. So we're kind of north, west, and south. So we do have a lot of different options, but also we rely on the help of other fertility clinics that they are able to do this sort of just the blood tests and the ultrasounds in order to have the process to move forward, but then having them come to our office to do the actual either retrieval, embryo creation, or transfer of the embryo.
Great. So, and I'm wondering, maybe you could talk a little bit about just how important it is or not that your agency and clinic be in the same place, and your lawyer and your insurance company. How much does geography matter when you're putting together this team?
Well, like I said, it's not one of the most important things. And so if a couple has a surrogate that they really love, that they don't live in the same city, please use that surrogate or a donor that you really, really love. First, I don't want anybody to compromise on their goals or what they want. We're very flexible. We work with everyone, work with even international patients. So location for right now does not matter. And also many clinics, we're also doing Zoom consults now with the pandemic. And so you don't even have to be in Chicago to see me or in the, whatever city you're in to be able to see me for a consultation. So location for right now, no big issue.
Great.
As far for the medical part, not the legal part.
Yeah, I would jump in a little bit. I just have a little bit to add to that.
Yes.
From the point of view of the surrogacy agency, I would say that location, I agree with Dr. Alvarez that you should not compromise on what you're looking for in your journey, but I think you do need to appreciate that, because it comes back to me, I'm the finance person here. It comes back to me that expenses can quickly get out of control if you're flying people all over the country. Especially now with the pandemic happening, we've seen a lot of changes in terms of, are surrogates willing to travel? Right now, a lot of surrogates are not willing to get on an airplane because of the risks of COVID. And so we have people, had someone drive from Nevada to Texas this week, which I also don't recommend because that's a lot of stops, but because they were afraid to get on an airplane for COVID. So we have seen surrogates turning down matches if they're having to get on a plane and fly across the country to a clinic versus going to a clinic that is closer to them. So I would say that is a consideration in these current times. Also a consideration in these current times is the expense that's going to add. The airlines have cut flights and people aren't flying as much, and that's a double-edged sword. On one side, we've been able to sometimes find cheaper flights where you're getting a last minute fare and it's $50 to fly to Boston. That's fantastic. We've also seen where the surrogate needs to be in a certain city on a certain day, and there is one flight and it is $1,000, and you have zero choice because that's your transfer date to fly your surrogate on that flight. So I think you really need to look at expenses, and if you're willing, if budget is not a real big concern, and you have an amazing surrogate and you have an amazing clinic, and you don't care that you're going to have to fly them there, then that's great. But if budget is a concern, I think you need to look for a donor that's close to your clinic, because donors are going to have a longer stay at a hotel. And I think you need to look at a surrogate close to your clinic. Now, surrogate is less important. The surrogate is more important that she be in a state that is surrogate friendly, that's going to make the legal process easier for you. And she also has a shorter stay at the clinic. A donor has a longer stay at the clinic. So while Dr. Alvarez is totally correct, and you can do monitoring anywhere and you can collaborate, we always recommend you want to create your embryos and do the transfer at the same clinic. In our experience, I have seen people sometimes create embryos, let's for example, say in a different country, and they're frozen at one clinic and then thawed at a different clinic. And that can lead to issues if the freezing process is slightly different, the thawing process is slightly different. And so we always recommend do the whole process at one clinic.
So Rich, it looked like you had something to add to that, but I'm actually going to add a second question on that for you to answer after you weigh in on geography. So we have quite a few national dads on the webinar, which is fantastic. We have some people from Spain and some people from Canada. So we're getting quite a few questions about just what legal, you went over this a little bit in your presentation, but if you can just expand upon what international dads that are looking to do surrogacy locally need to be thinking about from a legal perspective.
Sure. So just to quickly tack on to what Dr. Alvarez and Kristen just said, I do agree with both of them. I think it is practically, it's more efficient if you work through one clinic for everything if you can. And I do think that there are certain things to consider when you want to manage costs. But, I say this all the time to clients. We do wonderful paperwork, all of us, we do wonderful medical work. But in the end, what is at the core of this, despite the number of professionals that are involved in your process, it's a human process. You've got people involved, and especially with the surrogacy, you want a good person. So if the right person for you is across the country, then match with that person, because that's going to really help you with a smoother process. And if your donor, your perfect donor, is on the other side of the country, you've got to follow the donor. So I think take that into consideration when you think about geography. In terms of additional legal considerations for, let's say, international parents that are coming to the U.S., it's really, really important at the very beginning that you have a consultation with a lawyer who understands these legal issues, because we want to make sure as lawyers that what we're doing for you here in the U.S. is not going to hinder anything you need to do when you go back home with that baby and want to be recognized as the legal parent of that child. There are some, let's say, I'll use Italy as an example. If you go back home with two men on a birth certificate, they won't know what to do, and they will probably not register both of you as parents. So in those cases, we have to think about what our paperwork here has to look like. So we need to make sure that they get matched in a state, for example, where the biofather can go on the birth certificate with the surrogate, at least initially. That way they go back home with a normal birth certificate, and then after that's done, when they get home and they register the child, then we can correct the birth certificate, remove the surrogate, and put the second father on for all time memorial. So it's really important to think about the end game and have a local lawyer in your home country collaborate with the U.S. lawyer as well, and to have those conversations early so that they can prepare the case from the beginning so that you have a smooth path all the way through.
Great, thank you so much. And so we have a couple of questions also, Virginia, about international insurance. Again, you went over this briefly in your presentation, but because we have quite a few on today, do you mind expanding on that a little bit? What international dads need to be thinking about if they are interested in surrogacy in the U.S.?
Sure. So an international couple has exactly the same issues as a U.S. couple, with one exception, and that exception is the newborn. You are still going to need the same insurances regardless of where you live, but when it comes to the newborn insurance, you would have to purchase a plan that will cover the baby in the U.S., born in the U.S. And so there currently are 3 plans on the market. The one of them you do need to purchase prior to transfer, and really about 3 months prior to transfer, because you have to be on the plan for 8 months before the baby is born. So if the baby is born prematurely and you want to ensure coverage, you really need to get it about 3 months. The other 2 you can purchase after the surrogate is pregnant. Actually, there's 3 others. After the surrogate is pregnant, but that has, with one company, it's kind of fraught with peril because they look at the surrogate's pregnancy journey. And if anything has happened in that journey up to about 20 weeks when you can apply, they won't give her insurance. So if you're thinking all along that can happen, you may not get it. And that's the only plan that will cover twins. And it's really, really expensive. So if you are going to have twins, you're looking at probably $90,000 just in insurance and co-insurance and deductibles and everything else. The other 2 you can apply early on in the pregnancy, right at transfer, etc. So that issue of what happens if there's a problem with the pregnancy goes away. They don't have as much coverage and they're more expensive. So you really need to think when to apply and to start the process early. If you're talking about getting insurance for the newborn in the U.S., if you're an international couple.
Great, thank you so much. So this next question is around twins, so thank you for bringing that up. And it's around just the cost difference, but I'm thinking we can expand on this. This is a very common question we get all the time. I think there's a perception out there that, and because it used to be much more common to do a twins pregnancy to implant multiple embryos than it is now. So actually, let's maybe start with you, Dr. Alvarez, if you can talk about why that's less the case today than it used to be, and then anything that you know about the cost differential from the fertility center side.
Yes. So there is a difference now how we're practicing today than we were practicing before, because IVF has become so good and very efficient that we're really getting really good pregnancy rates with single embryo transfers. And we're using very young donors, and so they have a very high probability of getting pregnant anyway. And so we are really trying to reduce the amount of twin pregnancies for several reasons. One is it's more complicated pregnancy. There's more risk of miscarriage, preterm delivery, needing a C-section for the surrogate. So it is a little bit more riskier. So I always discuss my recommendations as to the pros and the cons of doing a single versus a double embryo transfer. And there's also a double embryo transfer does not always guarantee having twins because one or both can stick. So there's no guarantee for twins either. And then we would definitely not transfer more than two. As far as the price difference, there is no price difference in transferring one embryo or two embryos. We do it all at the same time. So in that respect, there's no price difference. But I do know, and Kristen can talk about this, but the surrogate does have an extra fee, I believe, if they carry twins.
Yeah, I'll jump in there and say that there is not a price difference on the fertility side, but there is a price difference everywhere else. So again, COVID has changed things. And one of the things we've seen it change is the number of women who are willing to do a double embryo transfer. As I'm sure Dr. Alvarez will tell you, the number of women already that are qualified to be able to carry two embryos is a smaller pool because they have to go, really make sure that they are fit enough to be able to carry two babies and the additional strain that puts on their bodies. So that already narrows the number of women that are available to be double embryo transfer candidates. And then on top of that, now COVID has changed things. So women are considering, let's say, if it was a pregnancy with any kind of complications and they had to have more doctor's appointments or be admitted to the hospital, that increases their exposure risk to the world at large and to the chances of catching COVID. And then God forbid, if there had to be hospital bed rest, which is very rare, but if there was, in these current times, the husband and the children could not visit the women at all. So we're seeing a lot of women say, you know what, it's really just not worth it to me. I'm not going to agree to take the chance and do the double embryo transfer. So if you even find a woman who is medically qualified to be a double transfer candidate and then is willing to be a double transfer candidate, she's going to charge a substantial twins fee. I've seen anywhere between $8,000 to $15,000 just in additional twins fees paid to her. On top of that, she's going to get an extra stipend to go to the doctor more often because with twins, you're going to have a perinatologist appointment. You're going to have more frequent visits to the doctor. So that's more childcare, more lost wages. And then there is typically some bed rest with a twins pregnancy. We either see bed rest in the beginning sometimes, if there's some kind of a bleeding issue with an implantation, we've seen that. I would say maybe in 30% of cases. And then at the end, obviously, IVF babies tend to be larger. And so if there are two of them in there, I've seen bed rest at the end of a pregnancy. So now you're talking, in addition to the additional doctor's bills, you're talking about a potential early delivery. So the babies could be in the hospital for longer. That's going to lead to more costs for you on your insurance. It's going to lead for higher delivery costs. It's going to lead to a C-section fee. It's going to lead to C-section medical bills. And then also, if she does have bed rest, lost wages for her to be bed rest, even if she's not in the hospital. And so on average, we see a twins pregnancy costing $30,000 to $40,000 more on the surrogacy side. So it's definitely something to consider. It's not two for the price of one under any circumstances.
Yeah. Additionally, in addition to everything that Dr. Alvarez and Kristen have mentioned, there's also the residual cost on yourself, because if twin babies typically come, over 50% of all twins are born prematurely. And of that, the time in the NICU is 4 to 8 weeks. NICU costs in America are about $6,000 per day per baby. So the insurance costs can be astronomical, and if you don't have insurance, you truly can't afford it. The other reality is where are you going to be during that 4 to 8 weeks? So you're going to be away from your job, away from your home, away from your country, and supporting two different households at that point in time. So there's also those residual costs that often are forgotten because we all plan and dream on happy, healthy, chubby babies. And honestly, that is my wish for every single one of you. But the reality is it just isn't going to happen. And not to everybody. Some people, it will, definitely. But twins are just, honestly, I know everyone says it's 2 for 1, but it truly is not. And it's also the emotional cost. When those babies are in the NICU, it is a roller coaster ride that is not a fun one. And so you need to think about that.
Because of COVID, you may have to switch off and alternate.
Right.
You have to COVID test every time you go into the hospital, and things are dramatically different now, especially internationally. As you mentioned, the insurance costs, Virginia, the insurance costs for twin babies born in the U.S., we strongly discourage internationals from attempting twins.
So, Kristen,
yeah, so if you're getting the idea that you shouldn't try for twins, that's kind of what we're telling you. You know?
Yeah. My next question. I think it's pretty fascinating how much this has evolved since like even a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
And in the public eye, there's all you have these famous gay men, and they all have twins, and it was very common back in the day. So it's
and it was 10 years ago, 15 years
ago.
ago.
Rich has beautiful twin boys. Yeah.
And
I got lucky.
The reason behind it again is, it's understandable why people would want a gay couple would want to pursue twins if they're both interested in being biologically connected to at least one of the kids. So that's that's the impetus behind it, right? But so, Kristen, I know that a lot of surrogacy agencies have, because understanding that in order to try to discourage people from doing a double embryo transfer, that they have different types of programs that will discounts for sibling journeys. So could you talk a little bit about that, if that's something that people are
Oh yeah, definitely. We offer, we are trying to entice people to consider doing just one at a time. And we offer a substantial discount if people are going to do 2 subsequent journeys. Sometimes people will do 2 surrogates at the same time. If they want to do it that way, we offer discounts off that. We offer discounts if they want to go through again and use the same surrogate, or if for some reason they couldn't, we would offer another discount if they needed to be rematched again. But you can save substantially the second time around. As I'm sure Dr. Alvarez will say, a lot of the expense of the actual IVF process is the initial embryo creation. Egg donor medication is more expensive. Donor fees are more expensive. So once you go through that process and you've already got your embryos, the actual thawing and transfer for a sibling project is substantially cheaper than the first time around of creating it. You're going to save a lot on the medical process the second time around too. So in addition to all the discounts we'd get, most attorneys will just revise a contract with the same surrogate and not charge the full amount to draft the whole thing again if they're only changing numbers. So you can save a lot on a subsequent journey. It's not the same price as the first journey.
That's
correct. And I wanted to add on to that, Kristen. I just wanted to point out very precisely that it is correct, because a lot of patients who come to me that they want to do a double embryo transfer, and I have to really, talk them out of it, is because they really think that they're getting 2 for 1. So you get one huge, price, and you get 2 babies out of it. But really, doing a frozen embryo transfer, once you have an embryo, it's a quarter of a cost of creating the embryos. So I would say, both medically and financially, that a single embryo transfer at a time is the best way to go.
And you'll match faster because more surrogates available to match. So,
So we are nearing the end of our hour together. I know we could definitely talk about this for hours more. But again, if this is your first webinar with us, just know that we have a lot more of these planned throughout the rest of the year that are going to cover everything from the cost to the matching process to the egg donor process, everything that we've kind of touched on here today. We'll go into more detail on. And again, we have previous webinars that we've already recorded that are on our website, gayswithkids.com. And I really encourage you to go check out our new resource center to learn more about all of the topics we talked about today. But just in the 2 minutes that we have remaining, I want to make sure that each of our experts gets a chance to just kind of sign off. Let us know where we can find them. I'm going to drop into the chat some links for some landing pages that we have built out for our experts, and also their websites. You can follow up with them if you'd wish. But why don't we start with you, Richard, if you just want to sign off and let people know any kind of closing thoughts from a legal perspective and where people can find you.
Oh, he's muted.
Oh yeah,
Sorry about that. Yeah, from a legal perspective, my closing comment is, I think this would apply to almost all of it, really, not just the legal, is to do your research, stay calm, be patient. It's a long process. It's expensive. There will be, there are variables in this process. There are human beings involved. It's not as production oriented as it sounds. There's a lot of production involved, but be patient and manage your expectations that way.
Great. Thank you so much. Kristen.
I agree with what Rich said, and I loved what he said about this being a human process and having humans involved and makes it fallible. As much as the science is advanced, I think that taking your time with it and really making sure you have the right people involved is a key part of the process. And so Simple Surrogacy would love to be a part of your journey. We're located in Dallas, Texas. We've been working with gay families since our inception in 2002, so almost 20 years now, and we'd be delighted to help guide you on your journey.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dr. Alvarez.
Yes. So I would say that I reiterate what everybody's saying. Really do your research, find out who are the players in the LGBT community who are actually out here trying to help all of us create our families, as well as researching the pregnancy rates for the clinic and looking. Sorry, I just got a thing. Sorry. And really, yeah, just visit the fertility clinic, talk to a fertility doctor, know what the journey is going to look like, really go into, pregnancy rates, success rates, pros and cons, risks, benefits, everything, because it is truly, a journey, a long journey, like Richard said, and it's going to take some time. And then if you guys need any further information, you can always follow us at Fertility Centers of Illinois. I'm located in Chicago, and my Instagram as well is Dr. Juan Pablo Alvarez.
And so I'll just sign off again. I'm David Dodge. I'm I'm sorry, Virginia, please. Go ahead.
That's okay.
You're cut off. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So one thing is that we are licensed in all 50 states, so we can work really anywhere in the U.S., which I think is a big advantage. We can take care of you wherever you are. I also agree that this is a sprint. Marathon, it's not a sprint. So if you think it's going to happen in 2 weeks, it's not. Or, I have my egg donor, so we're going to transfer in a day. Yeah, it's not going to happen. There is a lot of steps in the process, and do not cut corners. Honestly, if you think that, we can do it ourselves, you will end up spending more money because something will go wrong, something will trip up, and unintentionally will pop up that you didn't even think of. So this industry has some amazing, and I even hate calling it an industry, this community has amazing experts. And we're very lucky to be on the panel with them today. There are also others. Just do your research, work with who you feel comfortable with and who you trust, and who has been in business more than 10 minutes. That would be my other recommendation.
Absolutely. Again, you will not see an expert on our page, which I just dropped the link to for all of the experts that we are working with. They all very much fit that bill. So I do encourage you to go check out their pages on our website to learn a little bit more about all the experts that we're working with. And I can't thank everyone enough for being on the panel today. We went through a lot of information, so I hope everyone's not super overwhelmed. But again, please do reach out to us, dads@gayswithkids.com, with any follow-up questions. We hope to see you in a future webinar. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.